We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist, Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. It's Friday, June 12th, 2026. Congratulations to everybody. You made it through the Monday to Friday grind. That is, of course, if you're a federal employee, because it's a federal Friday. So you're probably on the way to the house here, noontime Eastern. For the rest of us in the private sector, a couple more hours, and then you'll be well on your way. So congratulations nonetheless. Today, we're going to talk about how grocery stores are lying about organic foods. There's a new drug on the market to fix Ozempic butt. We have the president who loves inflation. 3/4 of houses on the market are unaffordable for Americans. Social Security is going belly up, and your order of birth might just be determining your success in life. So let's get after it.
That's the focus of your professional life, your personal life. It seems like it subsumes your whole being there. What are some of the concrete ways in which the fan experience has been degraded over the last several years?
I'll give you several, and I could probably talk for hours on this, and I have. Just think about what goes on with streaming now. Streaming is delayed. If you're watching a game on Amazon or you're watching a game on Netflix and you are sitting with your phone and you are texting with your friends or family about a game, you might find out what happened on the play a minute after it actually happened. Some of you know this experience. You've been sitting on your couch. You don't even want to look at your phone because it's a crucible moment of the game, and your buddy might have seen it already a minute ago. That didn't happen back in the day. We used to all watch games together. Streaming is delayed.
Well, that's a first order of business type of problem, right? We're a first world nation. We got to fix our streaming of games so that we can text our friends while we're simultaneously watching a game. It's really hard to stay serious, guys. That's Clay Travis. He's worth more money than I will ever be if I did this for 100 lifetimes. And he's testifying in front of Congress about, the most important things, the ability to stream sports in real time so you can simultaneously text on your smartphone about a play that just happened. First world problems. And I want to compare that because, I understand that there's a certain market for what that kind of guy is pitching out there. It's a much bigger market than the one we play with here on the American Radicals Podcast. And despite my best efforts, there are dozens of fans out there that watch us, and there are millions of fans that watch him. That's just the nature of the world. It's something that I'm coming around to the harsh acceptance. But I did, for a time, imagine that we were trying to make the country a better place. And yet, there's a congressional hearing for streaming sports. So I guess we don't even have that anymore, because when I think about congressional hearings, I'm thinking about like really important stuff, impactful things, people's lives on the line. I think about, my good buddy, Garrett O'Boyle, having his moment.
If one of your really good friends, your former colleagues, came to you and said, I have this thing that is being covered up, and I think the American people need to know about it, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them first to pray about it long and hard. And I would tell them I could take it to Congress for them, or I could put them in touch with Congress, but I would advise them not to do it.
So you would legitimately try to protect one of your colleagues from doing what you have done?
Absolutely.
And how do you think that solves being able to shine light on corruption, weaponization, any kind of misconduct that exists with the American people?
It doesn't solve it, but the FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. And we are all examples of that.
I can't think of a more sobering way to end a hearing. I yield back.
That was over 3 years ago. That was the same committee the Judiciary Committee, under the House, under the control of the same party, under the control of the same chairman. And we've now devolved into conversations about streaming on TV sports, whereas we were supposed to be having high-minded conversations about really important issues, about how an out-of-control government was putting people into cages. We're just not a serious country anymore, guys. And I know it's not anything that we're going to talk about today, but I saw that a couple days ago, and I've been trying to noodle it out in my mind how I was going to present it, and I can't. I really have no explanation for how we can get anywhere close to a modicum of seriousness, and really how we're going to have a successful American Radicals podcast when clearly the audience has now revealed itself. Clearly, the desires of the American people, they just want bread and circuses. But we're not going to give it to you on this program. That's my pledge to you. How about that? I'm going to continue to try to hammer home important issues that are there for you to see every single day. And if there's just not an audience for it, I guess there's just not. But for the few that actually take this seriously, that want to learn something, I appreciate you. I'm going to continue to hammer home the important things that are out there. I'm going to continue to prepare. I'm going to continue to present to you information that I think is crucial and vital because I owe that to you, as small as the audience is. So for the small audience that is out there, let's talk about some stuff on Friday, things that are going to pertain to your health and your wealth and your wisdom. And let's begin on the health front with the high wire from a piece from my friend Tracy Beans, who is talking about the organic label. Headline: the organic label is a promise. Thousands of grocery stores were breaking it. Now, there is a product out there called Produce Max, 2 X's. It's an EPA-registered antimicrobial pesticide. Essentially, you put the produce out there, and then periodically the grocery stores will spray the water on it. But the water can get kind of nasty, can cause some sort of bacteria to build up. So a small portion of it, they will actually spray this stuff called Produce Max. But they're spraying it on organic food in the grocery store, which is not supposed to have any of this spray. So Highwire actually wound up giving an expose on that because this Produce Max, it's 99.5% inert ingredients, and they don't list it. And it's being sprayed on organic material. So people who are paying the 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% extra in order to have just the produce that is out there, none of the chemicals, are not being told that this is being sprayed on their food in the grocery store. And the grocery stores are still labeling that stuff as organic. And what is the actual risk here? Well, I guess this Produce Max, when it is in some sort of a concoction, if you are long-term exposed to it, or you get repeated exposure to it because you keep going and buying the broccoli that's supposed to be organic and it's getting sprayed, it can cause problems. It can cause, I guess, like kidney problems and long-term or gut function issues. But still, there is a problem because the organic label is still out there. And what is the actual organic label worth in America? I said like 20 to 60% boost in the price for this. Look, I don't buy organic. It's not my jam. I think you can get your vitamins and your minerals from some produce, even if it's getting sprayed down with a little bit, as long as you wash it. But who knows? I just take my vitamins on top of that. I'm a really big fan of the Ocean's 11 scene where Brad Pitt goes to the old man. The old man is eating the oranges. And he goes, "What's up with the oranges?" He says, "My doctors need vitamins." He says, "Why don't you just take vitamins?" I just do that, guys. But there's a tremendous value in the market to having the organic label. And actually, according to the USDA, which I went and researched a little bit, I told you guys, I nerd out on some important stuff every now and then. The USDA does not have official statistics, but there's another trade organization called OTA, Organic Trade Association, and they say that it's somewhere in the area of $65 billion last year was spent on produce that was labeled organic. But, you're trying to get healthy. I don't know. I guess there's different ways up the mountain. There's multiple trails to get there. And the new one that's getting pushed, because there's two camps, really. If you had to break it down, there's multiple ways up the top of the mountain, but really, do you want to get there via the old-fashioned way? Blood, sweat, tears, eating your vegetables, eating your organic vegetables if you want to spend the money? Or do you just want to get some good old-fashioned government subsidized Ozempic? And when I say old-fashioned, I mean the new way. So according to BBC, though, people who are injecting Ozempic might be suffering from a brand new problem, which is going to require big pharma to solve yet again. Headline: New drug to stop Ozempic butt muscle loss, side effects of obesity jabs. I told you guys, we're going to hit kind of a grab bag of stuff, but I think the messaging will be a little bit more serious. I just can't help laughing at that this is an actual term, Ozempic butt. So obesity jabs curb your appetite, and they make you feel fuller, so you don't necessarily eat as much, so you start to shed weight. But people experience exaggerated loss of fat, muscle, and tissue. While not a medical diagnosis, some users complain of how their body shape changes, including a deflated or saggy butt called Ozempic butt. It is thought to be the result of rapid slimming rather than the medication itself. Really, really, Big Pharma, you're thinking it's not the drug that's causing the butt muscle to sink? It's definitely just from rapid slimming? You mean the rapid slimming that's a result of taking the drug? Okay, good luck with that messaging, Big Pharma. But Big Pharma, right? Create a problem and then get a solution. So now you can take your Ozempic and they're going to give you another concoction. They're going to encourage you to get a new drug so that you don't lose your butt. So there's a new study now in place, according to the BBC, where that this drug is called apitegromab. I don't know. It's the butt drug. It's going to help people who are taking these obesity jabs avoid the Ozempic butt in a trial of 102 adults, mostly women, you think? The women don't want the flabby butts. Those who took this drug with their obesity medication maintained more muscle while still losing fat, body scans are showing. So you got that going for you. But I mean, it was my opinion that you got the gene juice, the experimental clot shot, the coronavirus vaccine, and that caused myocarditis. Wasn't that a problem where your heart was getting too big? Well, now you can take Ozempic and shrink it. It was going to get you to a healthy balance, right? All things in moderation. But another element of that too that I saw that I was just dying laughing at was, I guess U.S. plastic surgeons are seeing a noticeable uptick in consultations about Ozempic butt. So if you want to avoid the scalpel, I guess you could take this drug, or you could do some squats, the good old-fashioned way. There's a good way to actually assure that you have butt muscles, and that is to exercise them as opposed to always looking for the easy button, which is exactly what everybody wants. They want the Ozempic. They want to take the shortcuts. They want to be fed cotton candy rather than their vegetables, which is why Clay Travis is super successful, and the American Radicals podcast is just trying to carve out a few dozen extra viewers a week. Okay, let's cough off the health stuff and let's talk about some wealth stuff. Some serious note: inflation's getting worse, guys. Stunner. This is an opinion piece over from the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness. Their editorial board. Headline: Inflation gets even worse. Subheadline: The problem is solvable with the right fiscal and monetary policy, because hope springs eternal. Everybody thinks the government can fix the problem that the government caused. So there was an announcement a couple days ago. There is a 4.2% inflation from last month, which is an increase from 3.8% inflation in April. And that is more than double what the Federal Reserve's target is for inflation, because the Federal Reserve believes that it is healthy for an economy to cause the money in your bank account to become worth less by 2% every single year due to spending by the government. That's considered optimal, healthy air quotes on that one, rather than a stable fiat currency. When you put money in the bank, you have $100 there today, and then you go 365 days later and it's still worth $100, maybe some interest on top of that. No. It's actually going to be worth $98 in an optimal sort of scenario. But due to the government spending that we're experiencing now, it'll be worth less than $96. So the government is stealing from you either through taxation or through inflation. Now, as a result of that, you've got the biggest concern being inflation as a topic. That is 1 out of 3 Americans. And 6 in 10 Americans believe that the economy is now worse than it was a year ago. Federal government has already borrowed over $1 trillion to date, and the projections are that we're going to borrow another $1 trillion. So by the end of the fiscal year, which because the government has to operate on its own quirky timeline, everybody here who is going to calculate their taxes. It's January 1st through December 31st. The government has to do it its own way. So it goes October 1st through September 30th. That's the fiscal year for the federal government. The total amount that the plan is to borrow $2 trillion. Now, why would your government need to borrow $2 trillion? Oh, because they're not going to steal enough money. I mean, tax it from you to get those funds into the Treasury to pay for all the money that it wastes. So they're going to have to borrow an extra $2 trillion on top of that, and then go to the Treasury and print more to cause even more inflation, which is why 1/3 of Americans are saying inflation is their number one issue. But I guess the 2/3 would include the president, who was very happy with inflation. This is the president being asked about the problem, and this is his response.
Sure, the right people come into our country.
I
will.
I will.
Are you concerned, Mr. President, about the latest inflation number which came out this morning? Could that be a
No,
headwind
I love it.
for
The numbers
Republicans
were
in terms of
great.
trying to hold
You know what I
on to
really
the
love?
Senate?
I love the inflation. You know why? Because as soon as this war is over, you know, I can say it now. Something you didn't know. Do you know we've been taking out millions of barrels of oil? Nobody knows it. You know who doesn't know about it? Iran, until right now. We took out the other night 22 ships, late at night with no lights, because they don't have any radar, because we blasted the crap out of it. We took out, that's why oil's $85 a barrel. I mean, you take a look. Remember when I did this, I said, look, the one bad thing will be, we hit the best economy we've ever hit. And I said to my people, I had Scott, I had Howard, I had Pete, I had all of them. I had Todd in the room. I said, the one thing we have to do now, we had just hit the highest stock market in history, highest 401ks in history. Everything was going well. And I said, I hate to do this to you guys, but Iran's going to have a nuclear weapon very soon.
That is a rambling response to a question. But at the very outset, he gave you his true feelings, right? President of the United States, he loves the inflation that will be run in every single commercial for a Democrat in the midterms, because they're going to tie their opponent, who's a Republican, to the president of the United States because he's a Republican. Not good, not good. And we had record stock markets. Well, we still have record stock markets because of the inflation, because the dollars that are being invested into the stock market are not worth anything. They're effectively worth toilet paper, dumping an entire amount of useless money into a stock market. Ergo, the financial markets are not really reflective of a strong and healthy economy. Now, the president, he loves inflation. And then he started going into how they're stopping a bunch of oil from coming out, so that will artificially increase the price of oil, increase the price of the pump, which he thinks is a good thing because he's economically illiterate, or at least politically illiterate, apparently. Now, one element of the economy that is concerning to people outside of inflation, or it actually is connected to inflation, is the housing market, which is growing increasingly unattainable for a majority of Americans. So I have a story from bankrate.com, and this is tremendously concerning. The headline, priced out of 75% of the market, Americans' dream of home ownership has become a luxury. A new analysis shows that anyone earning the median U.S. income will find themselves priced out of 3 of every 4 homes in the market. All right, so a little bit of nerd stuff, a little bit of number stuff. Let's just make sure that we're all tracking. Median income, not the average. You just got to list all the incomes, from the unemployed earning $0 to the people earning like $1.63 podcast episode like Steve Friend here, all the way up to the Elon Musk of the world, right? How much people are earning from the lowest to the most. And the middle number, that is the median income, which is on a household basis, not necessarily the individual. So as a household, the median number, smack in the middle, is right around $80,000. If you're earning $80,000 as a household, you cannot afford 3 and 4 houses. So $80,000, I mean, you're doing kind of average. You would think if you maybe are renting, maybe you own a house and you want to upgrade, or you want to move to a different neighborhood, or maybe get a transfer to a different location. You have to relocate and get to a different house. It's time to get into a new house. 3 and 4 houses are unavailable to you because you need to be earning somewhere in the area of like $113,000 to $115,000 as a household in order to afford the average home price per this analysis from bankrate.com. Because the median house, again, listing them from cheapest to most expensive, is $435,000, which is utterly stunning to me. I am not that old, guys. I mean, I am a man. I am 40.
Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
But my first house, my starter house that Madam Friend and I got into like 15, 16, 17 years ago. Gosh, she's going to get mad at me because I forgot the day we were married. That was less than a third of that. That's insane. That's insane. $435,000 is the average, or not the average, the median priced home in America. Now, homeowners are locked right now, some of them, into these ultra low mortgage rates, which is why there's a shortage. One of the reasons beyond the flux of 50 million illegal aliens taking up a whole bunch of houses, or if you listen to Greg Bovino, 100 million illegal aliens taking up houses. So that's causing a shortage. But another reason is that people who are in houses right now and they bought prior to the increase in the mortgage rates, which happened a few years ago, they're saying, hey, I could sell my house, but then I'm going to have to live somewhere. I'm going to have to buy a new house. And the mortgage rate for that is going to be much higher. So I'm just going to eat it. I'm going to stay where I'm at, even though there's some sort of a problem. Maybe I don't necessarily like the location, or I have an opportunity to move up in the house. Nope. I'm going to stay put. And when those people stay put, there's not a lot of velocity in the market, so that houses are coming off the market, going on the market, and coming off the house, because people are moving around. They're playing musical chairs with houses. That is not happening. One of the reasons is because the mortgage rates are higher now, because the inflation is so high that the Federal Reserve has had to increase the mortgage rates or increase the interest rates, and then the mortgage rates as a result of that are being driven up. That's one of the reasons that gets listed here. They don't mention the illegal aliens. And then the other is that the home prices themselves have soared. One is because there's a shortage, supply and demand. Another is because of inflation, because the government has printed just so much money that all these dollars are circulating out there, to the point where houses are 50% more expensive than they were just before a coronavirus pandemic. Have you seen an increase to your salary by 50%? No. I mean, there's been cost of living adjustments, and people who have theoretically been working since 2020, you would hope that maybe they got a promotion or two in the time being. Maybe they got a bonus, something like that. And all of that culminates with roughly 22%. So the average household income is 22% more than it was in 2020, but the average house is 50% more, which is why 3/4 of houses are unavailable to the normal American out there. The median household income, $80,000, which is a respectable household income, and yet you can't afford 3 and 4 houses. That is a problem. Now, let's compound that with something else, because debt is a problem for our government. It's also a problem for the consumer, a problem for the regular person. There's just too much month at the end of the money, and people have debt. They have consumer debt, and they have student loan debt, which is a big one. We have a student debt crisis in this country. So This is a piece about the new rules that are about to go into place, and people are going to feel the squeeze even more. They're going to have less liquidity, less ability to purchase a home because they're going to have to pay back their student loans. Headline is 7 million student loan borrowers will soon need to take action or be put on the most expensive repayment plan. This is actually from Business Insider. Beginning July 1st, just a few weeks from now, the Department of Education, which the president ran on shutting down, but I guess he likes inflation now. He likes the Department of Education. It's still functioning. They will notify student loan borrowers enroll in the SAVE plan, SAVE, the deadline to transfer to a new repayment plan. This is part of the One Big Beautiful Bill. They got rid of this repayment plan. Some have already said that the payments are projected to surge by hundreds of dollars. I saw around $500 was a normal increase, the amount that people are going to have to repay on their student loans because they've been in these plans that are saying like, hey, pay us the bare minimum, pay us just the interest, and interest rates are going up. Bottom line, people are going to have more money going out, and they're not going to be able to afford houses. And the money flowing out is going to be the result of these new repayment plans for their student loans, for just general cost of living, because going to the grocery store, you don't even have to be buying the organic produce, is just so expensive. I go to the grocery store for our family every week, and I, in the last year, can say comfortably, I'm not being hyperbolic, we're spending 50, 60% more at the grocery store. Now, for all the talk about, well, inflation's only 4%, not on stuff that is important, meat, cheese, fruits and vegetables. We don't count food, I guess, apparently, when it comes to inflation, or excluding the essentials like food and fuel and energy and housing. Inflation is only 4%. This is a problem. Everybody's feeling the squeeze, which is why 1 in 3 Americans is saying, hey, this is my number one issue. And what are the other issues that are not being addressed? Well, mass deportations of illegal aliens, government weaponization. But I guess that's not that important, which is why we got to talk about streaming sports in front of a congressional committee. All right. We're going to go and talk about some Social Security stuff in a second. But guys, before we do, want to make sure I remind you, if you haven't already, nice thumbs up, follow, subscribe on YouTube and Rumble. That would be much appreciated here on the American Radicals podcast. You can find us every weekday noontime. I know some of you do, not many, but try to share it if you can with a friend or 12 at AmRadPod. That would be great. And also you can head on over to the Spotify channel. And that is also at AmRadPod. And I will schedule the commercial on Spotify to run right about now. And now let's talk about some Social Security, because too much month at the end of the money. Maybe we could wait on the government to fix things, right? No, because Social Security is about to go belly up. This is actually from the Social Security office. This is a press release, and it's talking about how this thing is about to go insolvent in 60 years? No, 6 years. 2032. It's not that far away. It's 2 presidential election cycles, guys. Social Security's trustees report said the program is on track to become insolvent by 2032. And that doesn't mean that it will be completely $0. It will mean, though, that everybody who's getting a Social Security check will have it cut by around 22%. Now, we said that the average American has seen the money coming in increase by about 22% since 2020, mostly because of inflation. But there's been some other issues in there where people are doing better for themselves. Could you afford a 22% decrease? That's what's going to happen if you're collecting Social Security. And a lot of people are on fixed income, because the accounts have been managed so poorly in Social Security and invested so badly, which is a negative rate of return. The last time I checked it, I think it's like a 2% negative rate of return in Social Security. You'd be better off just putting it in the bank, in the hope that inflation doesn't go rampant. Social Security's beneficiaries are going to see their monthly benefits slashed by $500. Oh, just kind of like around the time that people are going to be having to pay more in their student loans by around $500. The guarantees in Social Security if it will impact 70 million Americans, and it's going to be more and more because we're having less babies too, and we have an aging population. So we're having less people paying into the system. So what is going to happen? Well, there's been different ways. We can attack it from one angle or the other. It'll probably be both because the government solution is just to tax more money from Americans. So they're going to have to tax. They're going to lift the cap on the payroll tax. They're going to say, well, all of your income is now subject to Social Security, and they'll probably increase the amount that the government's going to tax from you in order to do it. And then also limit the number of recipients. So you have people who have paid into the system with the full expectation that they're going to have Social Security there as a baseline. And they're going to say, well, government determined that you just earned too much money throughout your life, so you don't get to participate. Thank you again for contributing to it. You have now had your money successfully redistributed from each according to his ability to each according to his needs in a socialist sort of system, which is what Social Security is. Now, at its origin, and I'm opposed to it, it's not written in the pesky, dusty documents, but you could articulate some sort of sympathetic case. Because when Social Security arrived on the scene, the age at which you're able to collect was beyond the age you were expected to live in the country. So essentially, the expectation was it's for war widows, for that one woman through some genetic freak. She lives beyond the life expectancy. So as a society, we're going to pay into the system, and that pool of money will be available for the very few people that outlive life expectancy. But because of modern medicine and technology, things like eating organic and now taking Ozempic and whatever drug you need in order to make your butt look sexy again, people are living longer. So another sort of solution to this is raise the age that people are allowed to collect Social Security. And that will be a way to make it last a little bit longer. But we're always just sort of putting Band-Aids on this thing because the way that the system works, the nature of the system is to bankrupt itself. It's a giant Ponzi scheme. When's the last time you heard about a Ponzi scheme being a successful business operation? Hey, it's a Fortune 500 company. It's gone into the going concern into the future. It's a Ponzi scheme. That's what Social Security is. It will inevitably fail. Despite any efforts to raise taxes or raise the retirement age or do some sort of means testing, it inevitably will collapse on itself. You're just punting it down the road, kicking the can down the road so that it doesn't come back on you as a politician, because that is what government does. It avoids all accountability. It holds all the cards, and it just wants to avoid being held responsible for the failures of their predecessors or even the current occupants in office, because they're making decisions now like people putting out the CARES Act who were in place a few years ago. So many of those politicians are still in place. Putting in the Inflation Reduction Act, i.e. the Green New Deal during the Biden administration. Now, a lot of those politicians are still in place. And when the chickens come home roost, they don't want to experience any sort of accountability. And this was all about Social Security. But included in this press release, again, from the Social Security office, there was a little bit more information. We won't dig into it, but just so you know, Medicare is also going to go insolvent as well. That impacts another 70 million people, and that'll go insolvent in 2033, so the following year. Right after Social Security gets cuts, then Medicare will as well. It's almost as if these robust welfare systems that we have here, the social safety net, are just kind of on course to be completely collapsed within right around the same time. It's like it wasn't thought out at all. Now, inflation, cost of living, the government, though, they're doing really well when it comes to spending. So I want to actually talk about the military industrial complex and just how much money gets wasted. There is a Government Accountability Office report that came out, and it was actually reported on by the Daily Caller, but I have a link to the report itself. I'll put them both in the show notes for today. And this came out of another committee meeting. I mean, it wasn't about sports streaming with Clay Travis, but this was about actually responsible spending. And Tim Burchett from Tennessee was the chairperson of the subcommittee, not the biggest Tim Burchett fan, but they were digging into how much money the Department of War is wasting and the mechanisms in which they waste it. And this is pretty gross. Here actually is what the visual looks like for this report. You see the headlines as West Weapons Systems Acquisition, Beyond Business as Usual, Using Leading Practices to Curb Waste and Save Billions. And the name of this subcommittee hearing, because everything is Hollywood for ugly people in Washington, D.C., getting taxpayers a better bang for their buck from military contracts. The most damaging waste to the U.S. military procurement system occurs when projects are designed to, quote, fail slow. These projects continuously consume capital while they remain on the drawing board, even as technology that surpasses them becomes available. How does this work, guys? There will be a pitch for some sort of sophisticated weapon system, some sort of defense system, some sort of vehicle, whatever it is. And right away, we got to throw a ton of money at it. Department of War has like $2.4 trillion pledged out the door that they're going to invest in future innovations and weapon systems. We're going to throw a bunch of money at this thing. And now we're pot committed. And it's on the drawing board. And it will be a project as projected to go out for years in development, research, development. We're going to get to a finished product. They push the money out right away. Now you're pot committed. And then it just sits on the drawing board. And there's little nibbling around the edges, or, oh, we're just finalizing this thing, or we're in phase 2 of that thing. I'm thinking about that Top Gun Maverick jet that doesn't exist, that was going to be going like Mach 10, right? It's something like that. It just never gets off the ground. And it never gets off the ground because by the time that it's able to get off the ground, technology has advanced to a point where this new thing isn't new. It's actually obsolete. But we've been able to prop up some jobs, right? Which is what this report actually goes into. So the term of failing slow, the process incentivizes starting fast, awarding massive development contracts quickly, often in the name of preserving the industrial base. Oh, we're going to send all that money Raytheon or Boeing. We got to create those American jobs. We got to push this money out the door as fast as possible. We're going to obligate the funds quickly to ensure that the budget is not lost. So we got to spend it now because we're in September, guys. It'll be September of the fiscal year. The year-end funds are coming up on end. We got to push this money out now. And then it just exists on the books. And we wind up spending money on things that are no longer useful to us by the time they're ready to launch. It is costing us trillions of dollars. Success is all too often measured by activity, meaning money spent, not by outcomes, capabilities delivered. That's the quote that comes from the report, which is spot on. And it is in keeping with every experience that I ever had. I never worked in the Pentagon or the Defense Department, or now the Department of War, but I had the exact same experience being a government employee where you had end of the year funds, where these things needed to be spent right away so that we didn't lose them next year. Because if you don't spend it, you go back to Congress and ask for money to be on par with what you got last year. A responsible Congress who's being a good steward of the American taxpayers' money that is stolen, I mean tax from them, would say, hey, you know, you only spent $10 billion last year. We allotted 11. We got a refund of $1 billion. So why don't we just cut your budget down to 10? You do more with less. Now, that never happens, but that sort of possibility is always there. At least it's harped on. They say, hey, spend the money. We got to go get things, which is how you get things like I did, like pocket knives for $200 that you go to Walmart and get for $16. Okay. That's a lot about the wealth. I want to now go into the wisdom. And I've got a few pieces that I want to actually drill down on. And I'll go back to the highware for the first one. And this is all about screen time. And this is really troubling. The headline is the $30 billion screen experiment that failed our children. American schools spent $30 billion on education technology. Well, they sound like the War Department. They spent $30 billion in 2024 alone. That is 10 times what they spent on textbooks. The goal was to modernize instruction, close equity gaps, which is just code speak for communism, and prepare students for a digital future. Now, what is the results? If we go back to the capability versus the activity, right? That's what the Department of War was doing. Success was measured by activity, meaning money spent, rather than outcomes, which is capability delivered. So we spent all the money. What was the delivery? Gen Z is the first generation in modern history to score lower than their parents on math, literacy, and creativity. IQ scores in Western nations rose for over a century, and they reversed right around the time that these devices arrived. So we're dumber now. Well done, everybody. I think that warrants hashtag winning. That's hashtag winning. Now, there are some efforts to reverse this. Not so much in America. I mean, there's a few localities and states that are really digging into this, but there are some inspirations we can take from abroad. I'm an America first guy. I'm an America only guy, but I can recognize best practices. And it seems like they might have something going on good in Sweden, which is good again or bad again. I can't remember. First, they were good because they were communists, and then they were bad because they were doing herd immunity during coronavirus. Now we don't know where they are, but here's what they're doing. Sweden, one of the first nations to replace textbooks with screens, which they did in 2009, 17 years ago, is now investing to put paper textbooks back in the hands of every student after concluding that attention spans shortened and learning did not improve. And there are some other stories that are coming out of these Norwegian research. They're involving 30 different countries. They found that the shift to screen-based reading replaces deep comprehension with shallow skimming. Now, guys, come on. Can you be accountable? Are you looking at something on your phone or your tablet or your computer? You're reading an article. Maybe one of the links that I share on the American Radicals podcast here. I put it in the show notes. And you think, oh, Steve talked about that. I want to do some deeper digging. And you click on it. Are you really reading it? Are you reading that first word, the last word? I try to, because I've written an op-ed or 12. And I say, hey, I worked and slaved over every single word on that one. I'm going to try to respect the author to this one. But even I fall short. I start to skim. I try to prepare the show. Oh, I got the high points. I know I can monologue on this one for 5, 6, 8 minutes and then move on to the next topic. How often are you doing that? We're all doing it. Our attention spans are kaput now. We're basically goldfish. You read the headline, you try to find a couple different things in there, and then you think you know it, but you don't, which is why a lot of these news sources will hide the crucial information 6, 7 paragraphs deep, and all of a sudden you actually aren't as informed as you think. But to the wisdom context here, to the learning context, I can tell you there is not a chance in the world that I would have retained anything, any modicum of what I retained from my schooling if I had been on a computer. I flat out refused to do it. Handwritten notes every single time. I recently went to that training at the beginning of May when I went to the law enforcement requalification, the equivalency training, paper and pen. I made sure I was writing stuff down because you retain it. I know people can say, oh, I type my notes. Typing does not cause you to retain it. It just doesn't. You will never convince me otherwise. Any sort of study, I'll think, oh, it's probably funded by the government and completely doing some sort of propaganda effort. Now, the screen times are making all of us dumber, particularly the kids. Gen Z, who knows nothing different. They never existed in a time where they got writer's cramp, right? Where you had a callus on your pinky from having it smear across the page. I'm left-handed, so it'd be worse than others. I get that nice callus on my pinky. They don't have that now. It's all digital. Well, what is our long-term prospects looking like? We're not having enough kids to support Social Security. Are the ones we're having, are they actually up to speed, or is there still the learning loss? So I saw this piece over from the 74million.org, which was talking about America's report card. How are we doing in our school system? Headline, long-term NAEP, which stands for National Assessment of Educational Progress, shows growth for 9-year-olds, more disappointment for teens. So this is America's report card. How are students doing? It tracks on mathematics and language. Here are some bullet points. Average 9-year-olds improved by 4 points since 2022. So that's good. We keep measuring 9-year-olds year after year after year. It seems like they're doing better. But 13-year-olds made no progress. They actually went down a little bit. Why would that be? When they go into it here in this piece, well, go back in time, 2020, right before the explosion in home prices because inflation went out the door, right? Well, the 9-year-olds were really little. They were in pre-K, kindergarten. They sort of avoided the learning loss that the 13-year-olds got because the 13-year-olds were in 2nd and 3rd grade when they were really trying to learn to read, or historically, that's when we were really hammering home when kids were learning the fundamentals. You're learning your multiplication tables, you're learning literacy. And they were sent home and told, stay home, stay safe, do Zoom school. So their learning loss has not been recouped. It looks like the 9-year-olds might have avoided it, but they didn't, guys. They didn't, because I actually dug deep and tried to deduce a little bit out of there, because it still doesn't make sense. In kindergarten, you're learning some crucial information. 9-year-olds say they've been assigned no homework. The previous night rose from 19 to 39%, by the way. It doubled from 1 in 5 to 2 in 5 of kids in 3rd grade saying, I don't get any homework. So are we keeping the gains? Are we reinforcing what's being taught? Or are they just going to then matriculate to where the 13-year-olds are in a few years and just be experiencing the exact same numbers? So we're not holding on to what we actually got, the increase, the slight uptick. And then 37% of 9-year-olds, 14% of 13-year-olds said they read for fun almost every day. I have a graphic for that. But back to the 9-year-olds. It looks like, and look through the data, most of the gains are for the low-performing 9-year-olds, which is good. It's good. I mean, if you're a low performer, we want to make sure that we're trying to bring you up. You might just not have the intellectual bandwidth, a low IQ person. The IQ is a bell curve, guys. That means half the people are below average, below 100. That's just the way that the human species operates. Those people still need to be taught how to read, write, and do arithmetic. But if most of the gains are coming from the dumbest kids, it means that the teachers are spending all of their time with the dumbest kids, and the smartest kids are being left just to their own devices. It might actually be an actual device because they're on some sort of a Chromebook, and they're not getting the homework to reinforce things. So there's not actually happening any sort of education for the people on the right side of the bell curve. And I think as a result, we're not getting any reinforcement. They will then, in a few years, find themselves where the 13-year-olds are right now, where they are not maintaining the gains because they're not being forced to actually push themselves. Everybody's being taught to the lowest common denominator. And the lowest common denominator is this last point that I brought up and mentioned, the number of kids that read for fun. Again, I'll repeat it. 37% of 9-year-olds, 14% of 13-year-olds read almost every day. That's why we skim. Nobody reads. I actually have a graphic. I'll throw it up here. If you happen to be watching on YouTube and Rumble, later on Spotify, you'll see it. You see the fall from when this first was a thing back in 1984. So over 40 years. And it looks like over half of the 9-year-olds and about 35%. So 1 in 3 13-year-olds were reading every day. And now it's 1 in 3 9-year-olds and 1 in 6, 1 in 7 13-year-olds read every single day. And it was pretty steady, actually. It kind of fluctuates a little bit, you see, but you see we're in excess of half the 9-year-olds were reading every single day until right around 2012. And that's when the tech came in. That's when everybody stopped reading. They're not reading the paper. And even if they are reading, they might be saying, well, you know, I'm reading it on my Chromebook or my laptop or my phone, and you're not retaining the information. You're not learning anything, which is why we're seeing the learning loss. And even the learning gains we're getting are for people who are on the left side of the bell curve and most likely are not going to achieve much more than they are at that level. All right. But those are all external factors. I mean, that's the issues that you're getting inside the school system. A lot of it goes back to home. I mean, you want parents to be teaching kids to read. They want to be reinforcing it. We're certainly doing it in our household. Summer reading is a thing in the friend house. But what about birth order? So I want to close this out on this thing that it's interesting. It comes from the Washington Post, and I think it's worth digging into just because it might not totally be your fault, guys, if you're a little bit retarded. It might be that you were born second. From the Washington Post, Democracy Dying in Darkness. Headline, your birth order affects your future, but not for the reason you think. Now, younger siblings, they tend to have wealthier parents, right? Because parents theoretically are a little bit more on into their careers. They had gotten a promotion. They have had some cost of living adjustments. They got a little bit more financial stability. So theoretically, if you're living in a wealthier household, statistically, you should be doing better. Plus, your older siblings, they got all the early reps from the parents. The parents develop best practices, but that's not what's happened. So there's a study. It's actually from like 20 years ago. It found that younger siblings fare worse than firstborns on lifetime earnings, education, mental health, and teen pregnancy. The later the birth order, the worse it got. So a third kid is worse than the second, and a fourth kid is worse than the third. The youngest siblings get measurably less schooling than the firstborn. Now, here is where the nature versus nurture. Is it genetic? No, it's actually a lot of nurture, because parents seem to dote over the firstborn more than the second one, because the subsequent kids, they're kind of like, been there, done that. We'll let the kids raise the kids, and maybe they're being, maybe they're more involved in their career. Whatever it is, maybe they're just a little bit careless. They're kind of worn out. They're kind of tired. I did it once. I read those stories. I want to read them again. I don't want to have to go through learning the multiplication tables all over again. Whatever it is, the numbers bear out that firstborn kids get about 30 minutes more attention every day than second and third kids. And when you extrapolate that to hours reading and playing and learning other activities, it's like 3,000 fewer hours spent over the course of a kid between the ages of 4 and 13, right around the time where they'd be learning to read. That's a year of education, guys. So that would stand a reason why you would earn less money. You'd be less successful. And then another element of it too, that's completely understandable, is that younger kids get sick early on, because older brother, older sister goes to kindergarten, which is just a giant petri dish of disease, and then comes home and brings the germs with them, and the baby gets sick. And that's why you might have a slower development. It's just the way that the world works. Now, the Washington Post has some recommendations, because they want to make sure that they insert as much communism as they possibly can. So they're big on making sure that every kid gets a gene juice, gets a clot shot. So make sure that you're vaccinating all the time, every time. But then their better takeaway is like, hey, just try to spend more time with your kids. They must have got that from the Institute of Very Obvious Things. But never let a crisis go to waste. They say that the government should get involved in that. Paid family leave, flexible work arrangements. They need to have mandated lactation-friendly workplaces, and universal access to pediatric care. So universal health care will solve the problem of second and third children being more financially successful than their older siblings. That's the general takeaway. I guess the people who wrote this piece over at the Washington Post were probably in school when there was lots of Chromebooks rather than paper, because that's a functionally retarded conclusion to draw. Okay, so churn and burn through a bunch of different stuff to try to make you healthy, wealthy, and wise. And I hope that you all got something out of it, as opposed to learning about how it's really important to stream sports on real time with cable, so that you can text on your screen that you just skim news stories on with your friends about really important moments in the sports ball game. Okay. But on the subject of sports ball games, I do have a palate cleanse for that, because some of this stuff was a little bit down, and I covered down on some really dark stuff this week, guys. I want to send you off on a happy note for your weekend. So if you have a kid who plays youth sports, make sure that he is on a team with this number 50. Do everything that number 50 does, and you will be healthy, wealthy, wise, and successful in life. Good stuff. All right, guys. Appreciate you, as always, for joining us today and for this whole week. We'll plan to be back with you on Monday, noontime Eastern, here on YouTube and Rumble. And until then, have a great weekend.
You've been listening to the American Radicals Podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRad.